The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street in Cedar Creek, Texas, painting the weathered storefronts in golden hues that did little to mask the town's economic struggles. Martha Richardson unlocked the heavy wooden door of Richardson's Leather and Boots, the brass key catching the light as she turned it with practiced ease. The familiar creak of the hinges welcomed her into the dimly lit shop that had been her family's livelihood for over 60 years. At 52, Martha carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered many storms, both literal and figurative. Her silver-streaked brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her hands bore the calluses of decades spent working leather alongside her late father, Henry Richardson. The shop around her told the story of 3 generations of craftsmanship: hand-tooled saddles hanging from wooden pegs, rows of custom boots in various stages of completion, and the rich aroma of leather conditioner and wax that seemed to permeate every corner. "Another day, another dollar," Martha whispered to herself, though lately those dollars had become increasingly scarce. She walked behind the worn oak counter that her grandfather had built in 1962, running her fingers along its smooth surface, as she had done every morning for the past 23 years since taking over the business. The cash register, an antique model that still rang with satisfying authority, showed a balance that made Martha's stomach tighten. $47.38. After paying for materials, utilities, and the small salary she gave her part-time employee, Sarah Martinez, there was barely enough left to keep the lights on. Sarah arrived at 9:30, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to Martha's worried expression. At 28, Sarah possessed an infectious optimism that had carried both women through many difficult days. She hung her jacket on the hook by the door and immediately noticed Martha's troubled face. "Morning, Martha. You're wearing that look again. The one that says you've been up all night doing math that doesn't add up the way you want it to." Martha managed a weak smile. "Am I that transparent?" "Only to someone who's been working here for 5 years," Sarah replied, moving to straighten a display of leather belts. "What's the damage this time?" Martha pulled out a stack of bills from beneath the counter, spreading them like a losing hand of cards. "Property taxes are due next month, $3,400. The leather supplier is threatening to put us on cash-only terms if we don't pay our outstanding balance of $2,100. And Mrs. Henderson from the hardware store called yesterday about our account there." Sarah's optimism faltered as she absorbed the numbers. "How much do we have in the checking account?" "Enough to maybe make it through next week if we're careful." The bell above the door chimed, and both women looked up hopefully. An elderly man in a battered cowboy hat shuffled in, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Martha. "Morning, ladies. I'm hoping you can help me with something." "Of course, Mr. Patterson," Martha replied, recognizing one of their longtime customers. "What can we do for you?" Edgar Patterson had been coming to Richardson's for over 30 years, always for the same thing, resoling his favorite pair of work boots. He was a retired ranch hand who lived on a modest pension, and Martha had long ago stopped charging him full price for the service. "Well, it's these old friends again," he said, holding up the worn boots. "I know I was just here 3 months ago, but they're about to give up the ghost entirely." Martha took the boots and examined them. The leather was cracked in several places, and the soles were worn completely through in spots. Any reasonable cobbler would have declared them beyond repair months ago. "Mr. Patterson, these boots have served you well, but I'm not sure there's much more we can do for them. Maybe it's time to consider a new pair." Edgar's face fell. "I appreciate the suggestion, Martha, but you know I can't afford new boots right now. These here have been with me through 40 years of ranching. They've got plenty of stories left in them." Martha felt her heart break a little. She knew Edgar's financial situation was even more precarious than her own. "Tell you what," she said, "let me see what I can do. Come back Friday afternoon and we'll have them ready for you. How much will that be?" Martha looked at Sarah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. $20, same as always. Edgar's relief was palpable. You're an angel, Martha Richardson. I don't know what this town would do without you. After Edgar left, Sarah helped Martha carry the boots to the workshop in the back. The workspace was cramped but organized, with tools hanging from pegboards and shelves lined with various types of leather, thread, and hardware. We're going to have to practically rebuild these from scratch, Sarah observed, examining the boots under the bright workshop light. I know, Martha replied, but what else can we do? Edgar Patterson has been loyal to this shop longer than most people have lived in this town. And that's exactly why we're in this situation, came a stern voice from the doorway. Martha turned to see her younger brother, David Richardson, standing in the entrance to the workshop. At 48, David was a successful real estate developer in Houston who visited Cedar Creek only when absolutely necessary, usually to lecture Martha about business decisions he didn't understand. Hello, David. I didn't expect to see you today. Clearly, David said, his expensive suit looking out of place in the rustic shop. I got a call from Jim Bradley at the bank yesterday. He's concerned about the loan payment that was due last week. Martha felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. I spoke with Jim. We worked out a payment plan. A payment plan that involves you falling further behind every month, David interrupted. Martha, you can't keep running this business on charity and good intentions. Mr. Patterson should be paying full price for services, or he should take his boots somewhere else. There is nowhere else, Sarah interjected, earning a sharp look from David. We're the only leather repair shop within 50 miles. Then maybe that's the problem, David said. Maybe this town doesn't need a leather shop anymore. Maybe it's time to accept that some businesses have outlived their usefulness. Martha set down the tools she had been holding and faced her brother directly. This isn't just a business, David. It's our family's legacy. Grandpa Joe started this shop with his bare hands and a dream. Dad spent his entire life building it into something the whole community could depend on. I can't just walk away from that. Grandpa Joe also didn't have to compete with Amazon and Walmart, David replied. Times have changed, Martha. People don't value craftsmanship anymore. They want cheap and fast, not quality and tradition. The argument was interrupted by the arrival of another customer, Tom Bradley, the bank president's son and Martha's high school classmate. Tom had always harbored feelings for Martha, though she had never reciprocated his romantic interest. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, Tom said, though his expression suggested he had heard at least part of the conversation. Just a family discussion, Martha replied diplomatically. What brings you by, Tom? Actually, I wanted to talk to you about your loan situation. Dad asked me to stop by and see if there might be some creative solutions we could explore. David's eyebrows rose. What kind of creative solutions? Tom cleared his throat nervously. Well, the bank has been looking for opportunities to invest in Main Street revitalization. We're thinking about offering a special refinancing package for established businesses that are willing to modernize their operations. What would that involve? Martha asked. Essentially, you'd consolidate all your current debts into one loan with better terms, but you'd need to agree to certain modernization requirements, updated point-of-sale systems, online ordering capabilities, social media marketing, that sort of thing. Martha felt overwhelmed by the technical jargon. Tom, I don't even know what half of those things mean. That's where I come in, Tom said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. I could help you set everything up. We could work together on updating the business model, maybe expand into online sales. I've always believed this shop has tremendous potential. David looked intrigued, but Martha felt a familiar discomfort with Tom's offer. Over the years, he had made similar proposals that seemed to blur the line between business and personal interest. I appreciate the offer, Tom, but I need some time to think about it. Of course, Tom said, but don't take too long. The bank's refinancing program has limited slots available, and I'd hate to see you miss out on this opportunity. After Tom left, David turned to Martha with renewed urgency. This could be exactly what you need. Tom's offering you a lifeline. Tom's offering me a leash, Martha corrected. Every time he tries to help the business, it comes with strings attached that make me uncomfortable. Your comfort isn't the issue here, David said bluntly. Your survival is. You have two choices: accept help and adapt to the modern world, or close the shop and sell the building while you can still pay off your debts. Martha felt the weight of 3 generations pressing down on her shoulders. The shop around her seemed to whisper the voices of her grandfather and father, reminding her of the promises she had made to preserve their legacy. I need to think, she said quietly. Don't think too long, David warned. I've already had 3 different developers ask about this property. The location is perfect for a chain restaurant or a cell phone store, businesses that actually make money. After David left, Martha and Sarah worked in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The familiar rhythm of leatherwork, cutting, stitching, conditioning, usually brought Martha peace. But today, it felt like she was trying to hold back the tide with her bare hands. You know, Sarah said eventually, I've been thinking about what Tom said. Maybe we don't have to change everything about the shop. Maybe we could just find ways to let more people know we exist. What do you mean? My cousin lives in Austin, and she's always posting pictures of vintage and handmade stuff on Instagram, gets thousands of likes. Maybe we could try something like that. Show people the work you do, the stories behind the boots and saddles. Martha looked skeptical. I don't know anything about social media, Sarah. I can barely keep up with email. You don't have to, Sarah said excitedly. I could handle that part. Take pictures, write posts, respond to comments. You just keep doing what you do best, making beautiful things. For the first time all day, Martha felt a spark of hope. Do you really think people would be interested? Are you kidding? Look at this place, Martha. Look at the detail in every piece, the history in every corner. People are hungry for authenticity these days. They just don't know where to find it. As the afternoon wore on, a few more customers trickled in. A rancher needing a saddle repair, a teenager looking for her first pair of real cowboy boots, an elderly woman who brought in her late husband's leather jacket for cleaning. Each transaction was small, but Martha found herself paying attention to the stories behind them in a way she hadn't before. The teenager, Jessica Murphy, was particularly memorable. She was preparing for her first rodeo competition and had saved money from her part-time job at the local diner to buy proper boots. I want something that will last, Jessica said, trying on a pair of handmade boots. My grandmother always said that good boots are like good friends. They get better with age and stick with you through everything. Martha smiled, remembering her own grandmother saying something similar. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She used to bring me here when I was little, just to look around and smell the leather. She said this shop was the heart of Cedar Creek. The words stayed with Martha long after Jessica left with her new boots. As she locked up the shop that evening, she found herself looking at the space through Jessica's grandmother's eyes, seeing not a failing business, but the heart of a community. The evening air was crisp as Martha walked the 3 blocks to her small house on Elm Street. The town was quiet, with most of the shops along Main Street already dark. Cedar Creek had never been a bustling metropolis, but lately it felt more like a ghost town than a living community. Martha's house was a modest 2-bedroom cottage that she had inherited along with the shop. It was filled with family photographs and handmade furniture that told the story of the Richardson family's roots in Texas. She made herself a simple dinner and sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and the stack of bills that seemed to follow her everywhere. No matter how she ran the numbers, they didn't add up to hope. Even if she accepted Tom's refinancing offer, the monthly payments would be only slightly lower, and she would be taking on the additional burden of loan guarantees that could cost her both the business and her home if things went wrong. The telephone rang, startling her from her calculations. The caller ID showed Sarah's number. "I hope I'm not bothering you," Sarah said, "but I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation today. I did some research on social media marketing for small businesses, and I think we might be onto something. Tell me more." There are hundreds of businesses like ours that have turned things around by showcasing their craftsmanship online. There's this boot maker in Montana who went from nearly closing to having a 6-month waiting list just by posting videos of his work process. Martha felt a cautious optimism stirring. What would we need to do? "Start small," Sarah said. "Take some pictures of the shop, maybe a few videos of you working on a repair or making a new pair of boots. I could set up accounts on Instagram and Facebook, start telling the Richardson story to a wider audience. And you think people would actually be interested? Martha, you hand-stitch every piece. You use techniques your grandfather taught you that most people have never seen. You've repaired boots for 3 generations of the same families. That's not just a business, that's living history." After hanging up the phone, Martha found herself looking at the framed photographs on her mantel. There was her grandfather in his workshop, her father teaching her to work leather when she was 10 years old, herself at the shop's 50th anniversary celebration 5 years ago. Each image told a story of dedication, craftsmanship, and community connection. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe the problem wasn't that people didn't value quality and tradition anymore. Maybe they just didn't know where to find it. Maybe there was a way to honor the past while embracing the future, to preserve the heart of Richardson's leather and boots while adapting to a changing world. As Martha prepared for bed, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would call Tom Bradley and learn more about the refinancing options, but she would also ask Sarah to start the social media project. She would explore every avenue, exhaust every possibility before giving up on her family's legacy. Outside her bedroom window, the streets of Cedar Creek lay quiet under a canopy of stars. Somewhere in the darkness, other families were probably facing their own struggles, making their own difficult decisions about dreams and survival. Martha Richardson was not alone in her fight, and perhaps that knowledge would give her the strength to continue. The old house settled around her with familiar creaks and sighs, and Martha closed her eyes, hoping that tomorrow would bring new possibilities she hadn't yet imagined. The weather forecast had been calling for severe thunderstorms all week, but Martha hadn't expected them to arrive with such fury. She was awakened at 3 in the morning by a crash of thunder so loud it seemed to shake the entire house. Rain hammered against her bedroom windows with the intensity of bullets, and the wind howled through the ancient oak trees that lined Elm Street. Martha lay in bed listening to the storm, worried about the shop. The building was old, and she had noticed water stains in the corner of the workshop where the roof met the east wall. She had been meaning to get it repaired, but like so many other maintenance issues, it had been postponed due to lack of funds. Another flash of lightning illuminated her bedroom, followed immediately by thunder that seemed to rattle the windows in their frames. This was more than just a typical Texas thunderstorm. This was the kind of weather that changed landscapes and lives. She dozed fitfully until dawn, when the sound of her neighbor's chainsaw woke her completely. Martha dressed quickly and walked outside to survey the damage. Her yard was littered with branches and debris, and Mrs. Henderson from next door was standing in her front yard, staring at a massive oak tree that had fallen across her driveway. "Morning, Martha," Mrs. Henderson called out. "Quite a night, wasn't it?" "I've never heard wind like that," Martha replied, picking up a large branch from her front walkway. "Any damage to your house?" "Just the tree, thank goodness, but I'm worried about Main Street. I heard from my sister that the wind took down some power lines near the courthouse." Martha's stomach clenched with worry. She grabbed her keys and drove toward downtown, navigating around fallen branches and scattered debris. As she turned onto Main Street, her worst fears were confirmed. The power was out along the entire commercial district, and several storefronts showed signs of damage from flying debris. Richardson's leather and boots looked intact from the outside, but when Martha unlocked the front door, she was greeted by the sound of steadily dripping water. She flipped the light switch out of habit, but nothing happened. The power outage extended to her building as well. Using her phone's flashlight, Martha made her way to the back workshop and immediately saw the problem. Water was dripping steadily from a section of ceiling where the roof had been compromised, pooling on the floor near her workbench and threatening a stack of expensive leather hides she had been saving for a custom saddle order. "Oh, no, no, no," Martha whispered, rushing to move the leather to a dry area. As she lifted the top hide, she could see that water damage had already begun to set in. The leather was discolored and would likely be unusable for fine work. She spent the next hour moving inventory and equipment away from the leak, all while water continued to drip steadily into increasingly full buckets and pans. The damage was worse than she had initially thought. Not only was water coming through the roof, but it was also seeping through the east wall where the building's old mortar had cracked. Sarah arrived at 8:30, bringing coffee and breakfast sandwiches from the diner down the street. "The power's out everywhere from here to the highway," Sarah reported. "They're saying it might be this afternoon before it's restored." She stopped short when she saw the buckets and the water stains spreading across the workshop ceiling. "Oh, Martha, how bad is it?" "Bad enough," Martha replied wearily. "I lost about $300 worth of leather, and that's just what I can see so far. The roof is going to need major repairs, and I don't even want to think about what that's going to cost." Sarah set down the coffee and immediately began helping to move vulnerable items away from the leaks. "Have you called your insurance company?" Martha's silence was answer enough. She had been forced to reduce her coverage 6 months ago to lower her monthly expenses, and she wasn't entirely sure what would be covered under her current policy. They worked together through the morning, doing their best to minimize the damage while waiting for the power to be restored. Around noon, Martha called Dave Patterson, a local contractor who had done work on the building before. "I can come take a look this afternoon," Dave told her. "But I'll be honest with you, Martha, I'm already backed up with storm damage calls. This weather hit the whole county pretty hard." "How long before you could start repairs?" "Depends on what we find, but probably not until next week at the earliest. And that's if the materials are available. After a storm like this, everybody's going to be competing for the same supplies." After hanging up the phone, Martha sat in her office chair and put her head in her hands. The irony was not lost on her. Just when she had decided to fight for the shop's survival, nature had delivered what might be the final blow. Tom Bradley arrived in the early afternoon, ostensibly to check on storm damage throughout the downtown area. He surveyed the workshop with a professional eye that made Martha uncomfortable. "This is unfortunate timing," Tom said, making notes in a small notebook. "How much do you estimate the repairs will cost?" "I won't know until Dave Patterson gives me a quote, but it won't be cheap." "Martha, I don't want to seem insensitive, but this might actually be an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" Tom's expression took on the careful neutrality of a banker delivering difficult news. "The bank has been reviewing your loan file, and frankly, your payment history over the past year has been concerning. Adding major repair costs to your existing financial obligations could put you in a position where we'd have no choice but to call the loan." Martha felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you saying, Tom?" "I'm saying that sometimes the best business decision is to cut your losses while you still have options. Your brother mentioned that you've had interest from developers. Maybe it's time to seriously consider their offers." "You've been talking to David about my business." Tom had the grace to look embarrassed. "It wasn't anything formal. He called me yesterday after visiting you, expressing concern about your financial situation. He's worried about you, Martha." "David's worried about having his name associated with a failed business," Martha corrected. "There's a difference." Sarah, who had been quietly working in the corner, looked up from the inventory she was cataloguing. What if there was another option? Both Martha and Tom turned to look at her. Sarah took a deep breath before continuing. "What if we could prove that the business has growth potential? That with the right marketing and community support, Richardson's could become profitable again?" Tom's expression was skeptical. "How would you prove something like that?" "Give us 30 days, Sarah said, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. "Let us try the social media marketing plan we discussed. If we can generate significant interest and actual sales leads, would the bank consider extending the current loan terms?" "Sarah," Martha said quietly, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but—" "No, hear me out," Sarah interrupted. "What do we have to lose? If we fail, we're no worse off than we are right now. But if we succeed, if we can show that people really do value what we do here, then maybe we can save not just the shop, but this whole block of Main Street." Tom looked thoughtful. "What exactly are you proposing?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed them a rough social media page she had been working on. "I want to document everything about this place, the history, the craftsmanship, the stories of the people who come here. Martha's not just a leather worker, she's an artist. Her grandfather's techniques are practically a lost art form. People will pay premium prices for that kind of authenticity if they know it exists." "And if they don't?" Tom asked. "Then we'll know we tried everything," Sarah replied simply. Martha looked around the damaged workshop, seeing 60 years of family history threatened by water stains and mounting debts. Part of her wanted to accept defeat gracefully, to take whatever offer David's developers might make and start over somewhere else. But a stronger part of her, the part that had learned to work leather at her father's side, the part that still felt her grandfather's presence in every corner of the shop, refused to give up without a fight. 30 days, Martha said finally. "Tom, if we can show real progress in 30 days, will you work with us on the loan?" Tom hesitated, clearly torn between his professional obligations and his personal feelings for Martha. "I can't make any promises, but if you can demonstrate genuine growth potential, I'll do everything I can to advocate for you with the loan committee." After Tom left, Martha and Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon planning their campaign. Sarah had done extensive research on social media marketing for small businesses, and her enthusiasm was infectious. "We need to tell the complete story," Sarah explained, pulling up examples on her laptop that she had charged in her car. "Not just what you make, but how you make it, the techniques your grandfather taught you, the tools he used, the customers who've been coming here for decades." "I'm not sure I'm comfortable being on camera," Martha said nervously. "You don't have to be a performer," Sarah assured her. "Just be yourself. Show people what you do every day. Let them see the care and skill that goes into every piece." They started simply, with Sarah taking photographs of Martha's hands as she worked on Edgar Patterson's boots. The late afternoon light streaming through the workshop windows created dramatic shadows that highlighted every detail of the restoration process. "These are incredible," Sarah said, reviewing the images on her camera. "Look at this one. You can see 3 generations of wear in those boots, and your hands bringing them back to life. It's like a story in a single photograph." As Martha examined the photos, she began to see her work through new eyes. She'd been so focused on the struggle to survive that she had forgotten the artistry inherent in what she did every day. These weren't just boots being repaired, they were pieces of people's lives being preserved and renewed. The power came back on just before closing time, and with it came the modern world that Martha had been both fearing and needing to embrace. Sarah immediately began uploading photos and creating the first posts for Richardson's new social media presence. "What should we call it?" Sarah asked. "Richardson's leather and boots is accurate, but maybe we need something that captures the story better." Martha thought for a moment, looking around the shop that had been her entire world for so long. What about where stories are reborn? That's what we really do here. We take things that are worn out and broken and give them new life. "Perfect," Sarah said, typing rapidly. "Richardson's leather and boots, where stories are reborn." The first post went live at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening in March. It featured a photograph of Edgar Patterson's boots before restoration, accompanied by text that Sarah had crafted with Martha's input. "These boots have walked 40 years of Texas pastures. They've been through droughts and floods, celebrations and sorrows. Today, they came to us nearly beyond repair, but their owner couldn't bear to throw them away. They've got plenty of stories left in them," he said. "At Richardson's Leather and Boots, we believe every well-loved item deserves a chance at a second chapter. We're 3 generations of craftspeople who specialize in writing those second chapters. Leatherwork, Texas, craftsmanship, stories reborn." Within an hour, the post had received 15 likes and 3 comments from people Martha didn't recognize. By the time she locked up the shop and headed home, the numbers had grown to 47 likes and 12 comments, with 2 direct messages asking about custom work. "It's a start," Sarah said as they parted ways in the parking lot behind the shop. "Tomorrow, we'll post the after photos of Mr. Patterson's boots and maybe a short video of you working on them." That night, Martha sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open to the social media page Sarah had created. She read every comment, studied every photograph, and for the first time in months felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The storm had damaged her shop and added to her financial burdens, but it had also forced her to take action rather than simply endure. Whether Sarah's plan would ultimately save Richardson's Leather and Boots remained to be seen, but at least now they had a plan that honored both the past and the future. Outside her window, Cedar Creek was settling into another quiet night. The storm had passed, leaving behind fallen trees and scattered debris, but also the fresh, clean smell of possibility that always follows a hard rain in Texas. By the end of the second week of their social media campaign, Richardson's Leather and Boots had gained over 300 followers across Instagram and Facebook. More importantly, they had received inquiries about custom work from as far away as Colorado and North Carolina. Sarah's instincts about people's hunger for authentic craftsmanship had proven correct, and Martha found herself cautiously optimistic about the shop's future. The water damage from the storm had been repaired, though the cost had depleted what little cash reserves Martha had left. Dave Patterson had done excellent work, but his invoice for $2,800 served as a stark reminder that they were still operating on borrowed time. It was a Thursday morning in late March when the weather took another unexpected turn. What had started as light rain the evening before had developed overnight into a steady downpour that showed no signs of letting up. By morning, the streets of Cedar Creek were dealing with significant flooding, and several businesses along Main Street had closed due to water intrusion. Martha arrived at the shop to find 3 inches of standing water in the front retail area. The storm drains, already overwhelmed by the previous week's damage, couldn't handle the volume of water running off from the surrounding buildings. "This is unbelievable," Sarah said, arriving 20 minutes later with a pump she had borrowed from her neighbor. "It's like nature is testing us to see how much we can take." They spent the morning pumping water and moving inventory to higher ground. The leather goods on the lower shelves had escaped serious damage thanks to their quick action, but the hardwood floors would need extensive drying to prevent warping and mold. Around noon, as they were taking a break from the cleanup, Martha noticed a large black pickup truck pulling up in front of the shop. Despite the flooding, someone was actually coming to visit during one of their worst days. The truck's door opened, and a tall man in a well-worn cowboy hat and faded jeans stepped out. He moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, seemingly unfazed by the ankle-deep water he had to wade through to reach the shop's entrance. "Y'all open for business?" he asked as he stepped inside, water dripping from his boots onto the already wet floor. Martha looked up from where she was arranging water-damaged inventory on a high table. The man smiled. "I understand perfectly. I have a large crew, band members, road crew, sound technicians. Good boots are hard to find, and when you find quality like this, it makes sense to stock up. Plus, I believe in supporting businesses that do things the right way." Martha's mind raced as she tried to calculate the total value. That would be over $18,000. "Sounds about right for quality work," the man said casually. "You take credit cards?" "Yes, but—" Martha hesitated, unsure how to process such an unexpected windfall. "Are you sure about this? I mean, we have boots in all different sizes. Some might not fit anyone in your organization." "Don't worry about that. I know people who can use good boots, and what we can't use immediately, we'll find homes for. There are always folks who could use quality footwear but can't afford to buy it new." Sarah had been watching this exchange with growing excitement, but also with a nagging feeling that she recognized the customer from somewhere. She studied his profile as he examined another pair of boots, and suddenly it clicked. "Excuse me," she said quietly, "but are you George Strait?" The man looked up with a gentle smile. "I was wondering when someone might ask." "Yes, I am." Martha's eyes widened as recognition dawned. George Strait, the king of country music, with more #1 hits than any artist in history. He was standing in her small-town leather shop, offering to buy her entire inventory. "Oh my goodness," Martha breathed. "I can't believe— What are you doing in Cedar Creek?" "I was passing through on my way to a show in San Antonio tomorrow night," George explained. "Saw the flooding and figured I'd stop to see if anyone needed help. Then I remembered seeing your shop's posts online. My manager showed me some of your work photos last week. Said I should check you out if I was ever in the area." "Your manager saw our social media posts?" "He keeps an eye on authentic Texas craftsmanship. We're always looking for quality gear for the band and crew. When I saw the flooding today, I thought this might be a good time to stop by and maybe help out a small business that's clearly going through some challenges." Martha felt overwhelmed by the surreal nature of the situation. "Mr. Strait, I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous, but I don't want you to feel obligated to—" "Ma'am," George interrupted gently, "I've been in the music business for over 40 years. I know what it's like to struggle to keep a dream alive, to fight for something you believe in when the odds are stacked against you. Your posts about preserving your family's traditions, about keeping craftsmanship alive in a world that's forgotten the value of quality. That resonates with me." He gestured around the shop. "This place represents something important. The care you put into every piece, the history in these walls, the connection to community, that's what real Texas is about. If I can help preserve that, it's money well spent." Sarah had tears in her eyes as she began calculating the total purchase on her calculator. "With tax, the total comes to $19,347.82. George pulled out a credit card without hesitation. "Perfect. And I want to add something extra for the inconvenience of the flood cleanup." "That's not necessary," Martha protested. "I insist," George said. He thought for a moment. "Make it $25,000 even. The extra can go toward any repairs or improvements you need to make." As Sarah processed the credit card payment, Martha found herself struggling to comprehend what was happening. This morning she had been pumping floodwater out of her shop, wondering how she was going to pay for the cleanup. Now, one of country music's biggest stars was not only buying her entire inventory, but providing enough additional money to cover her immediate financial crises. "Mr. Strait," Martha said, "I don't know how to thank you for this." "You don't need to thank me," George replied. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep preserving these traditions. Keep teaching young people like Sarah here that there's value in doing things right, instead of doing them fast." He paused, looking thoughtful. "Actually, there is one thing you could do." "Anything," Martha said. George pulled out a small notebook and wrote something on a piece of paper, which he folded and handed to Martha. "Don't read this until after I leave. But I want you to know that what you do here matters to more people than you realize. Sometimes it takes an outsider to help us see the value in what we have." The rest of the transaction passed in a blur of activity. George insisted on inspecting each pair of boots personally, complimenting Martha on specific details of construction and asking about the stories behind various pieces. He seemed genuinely interested in the craftsmanship, not just making a charitable gesture. "I'll need to arrange for pickup," George said, as they finished the paperwork. "These boots deserve better treatment than being loaded in the back of my pickup in the rain." "We can arrange delivery," Sarah offered. "Where would you like them sent?" George gave them an address in San Antonio. "My office can coordinate with your schedule. No rush. I know you've got cleanup to finish here." As he prepared to leave, George shook hands with both Martha and Sarah. "Ladies, it's been a pleasure meeting you. Martha, your grandfather and father would be proud of what you've built here. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Mr. Strait," Martha said as he headed toward the door. "Why did you really stop here? I mean, I know you said you saw our posts, but—" George paused in the doorway, rain still falling steadily outside. "My own grandfather was a leather worker down in Pearsall. Lost his shop during the Depression, never got the chance to rebuild. I guess when I saw your story, it reminded me of his. Sometimes we get the opportunity to help write a different ending to an old story." After he left, Martha and Sarah stood in stunned silence, surrounded by empty boot displays and the aftermath of the morning's flood cleanup. The magnitude of what had just happened was almost too much to process. "Did that really just happen?" Sarah asked finally. "I think so," Martha replied, still holding the folded piece of paper George had given her. "Should I read this now?" "Yes, definitely." Martha unfolded the paper and read aloud. "Martha, your family's dedication to craftsmanship and community represents the best of what Texas has always been about. I hope this small gesture helps you continue that tradition for another generation. But more than that, I hope you understand that your work touches lives in ways you may never know. The boots you repair carry people through their hardest days. The saddles you craft become part of family histories. The young people you teach will carry forward skills that might otherwise be lost forever. That's not just a business, that's a calling. Keep answering that call. The world needs more people like the Richardsons of Cedar Creek. George Strait." Martha's hands trembled as she finished reading. "He wrote this before he even made the purchase. He came here intending to help us all along." Sarah wiped away tears. "Martha, do you realize what this means? Not just the money, though that's incredible, but George Strait discovered us through our social media campaign. He saw our posts, recognized the value in what you do, and made a decision to support us. This proves that our strategy is working." Martha looked around the shop with new eyes. The empty boot displays would need to be restocked, which meant she would need to return to full-time production for the first time in months. The financial pressure that had been crushing her for so long had been lifted in a single transaction. "We need to call Tom Bradley," Martha said. "I think we have some good news to share with the bank. And we need to document this for social media," Sarah added excitedly, "not in a way that exploits Mr. Strait's generosity." but to show people that supporting authentic craftsmanship really does make a difference. As they began the work of cleaning up from the flood and preparing for their new reality, Martha reflected on the morning's events. She had learned something important about faith, about persistence, and about the unexpected ways that help can arrive when it's needed most. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside Richardson's leather and boots, the future suddenly looked much brighter. Martha Richardson had been reminded that her work was more than just a way to make a living. It was a way to preserve something valuable for future generations. And sometimes, when you're committed to preserving something valuable, the universe conspires to help you succeed. Word travels fast in a small town, and by Friday afternoon, half of Cedar Creek knew about George Strait's visit to Richardson's leather and boots. The other half learned about it over the weekend when Sarah's carefully crafted social media post about an unexpected angel went viral, garnering over 50,000 views and hundreds of comments from people around the world. Martha had been hesitant about publicizing George's generosity, but Sarah convinced her that the story needed to be told, not to exploit his kindness, but to demonstrate the power of community support and the value of preserving traditional craftsmanship. "We're not sharing this to brag," Sarah explained as she wrote the post. "We're sharing it to inspire others, to show that when people believe in something authentic, magical things can happen." The response was overwhelming. Orders began pouring in from across the country. Custom boot requests, saddle repairs, and inquiries about apprenticeships from young people who wanted to learn traditional leatherworking techniques. Martha found herself in the unprecedented position of having more work than she could handle. By Monday morning, she was facing a new kind of problem: success. Tom Bradley stopped by the shop first thing in the morning, ostensibly to check on the flood cleanup, but really to discuss Martha's dramatically improved financial position. "I have to admit," Tom said, watching Martha organize a stack of new orders, "when you and Sarah asked for 30 days to prove the business could grow, I didn't expect results quite this dramatic." "Neither did we," Martha replied honestly. "This has been overwhelming in the best possible way. The question now is how you're going to handle the increased demand. You're essentially a one-person operation trying to serve a national market." It was a valid concern. Martha had calculated that fulfilling just the custom orders received over the weekend would take her nearly 6 months, and new requests were arriving daily. "I've been thinking about that," Martha said. "I might need to hire additional help." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say," came a voice from the doorway. Martha turned to see her brother David entering the shop, but his usual critical expression had been replaced by something resembling admiration. "David, what brings you here so early?" "I wanted to apologize," David said directly, "and to see if there might be a way I could help with your expansion." Martha raised an eyebrow. "Help how?" "I've been thinking about our conversation last week, and I realize I was wrong about a lot of things. You weren't just being sentimental about keeping the shop open. You were preserving something valuable that I didn't understand." David pulled out his phone and showed Martha a news article from the San Antonio Express News, titled, "Country Star's Random Act of Kindness Saves Family Business." "This story has been shared thousands of times," David continued. "People are calling you a Texas treasure and praising George Strait for supporting authentic craftsmanship. Do you understand what this means from a business perspective?" "It means we have more orders than I can fill," Martha replied. "It means you have a brand," David corrected. "Richardson's Leather and Boots isn't just a local shop anymore. It's a symbol of something people desperately want to be part of. The question is, how do we scale this responsibly?" Martha was skeptical of David's sudden enthusiasm. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Partnership," David said. "I handle the business expansion, finding skilled craftspeople, setting up efficient production systems, managing the online presence Sarah has started. You focus on what you do best, the actual leather work and maintaining quality standards. Sarah looked up from the computer where she had been answering customer emails. That's actually not a terrible idea. We're getting inquiries about workshops, about shipping nationwide, about creating a catalogue of standard designs. Those are all things that require business expertise we don't have. Martha considered the proposal. 3 weeks ago, she had been fighting to save her family's legacy from her brother's well-meaning but misguided advice. Now he was offering to help expand that legacy in ways she had never imagined possible. What would this partnership look like, specifically? She asked. David had clearly been thinking about this. You maintain majority ownership and final authority over all quality decisions. I provide business management and expansion capital in exchange for a minority stake. We establish clear boundaries. I handle operations and growth. You handle craftsmanship and training. And if we disagree about the direction of the business? Your vote carries more weight, David said. This is your legacy, Martha. I'm just offering to help you share it with the world. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jessica Murphy, the teenager who had bought her first pair of real cowboy boots from Martha several weeks earlier. She was accompanied by an older woman Martha didn't recognize. Mrs. Richardson, Jessica said excitedly, I wanted you to meet my aunt, Linda Murphy. She drove down from Dallas specifically to see your shop. Linda Murphy stepped forward with a warm smile and a firm handshake. Jessica has been telling me about this place for weeks, and after seeing the story about George Strait's visit, I had to come see for myself. It's nice to meet you, Martha replied. What brings you to Cedar Creek? Actually, I have a proposition for you, Linda said. I own a boutique leather goods store in Deep Ellum, and I specialize in authentic handmade items. I've been looking for a supplier who can provide the kind of quality work I see here. She gestured around the shop. Would you be interested in a wholesale relationship? I could place regular orders for boots, belts, and small leather goods. Nothing that would interfere with your custom work, but enough to provide steady income between the big projects. Martha felt momentarily dizzy from the speed at which opportunities were presenting themselves. 2 weeks ago, she had been struggling to pay basic bills. Now she was fielding partnership offers and wholesale contracts. I'm interested, Martha said carefully, but I'd need to understand the volume and timing you're looking for. As you can see, we're dealing with a sudden surge in demand. That's exactly why this could work well for both of us, Linda replied. I'm looking for steady production of standard items, basic boots in common sizes, standard belt designs, simple leather goods. Things you could train apprentices to make while you focus on the custom orders. The word apprentices caught Martha's attention. It was something she had been thinking about since receiving several inquiries from young people wanting to learn traditional leather working techniques. After Linda left with contact information and a promise to follow up within the week, Martha found herself alone with David and Sarah to discuss the rapidly expanding possibilities for the business. This is happening very fast, Martha said. Part of me wonders if we should slow down and think more carefully about each decision. I understand the impulse, David replied, but sometimes momentum creates its own opportunities. The attention you're getting right now is incredibly valuable, but it won't last forever. We should take advantage of it while we can. Sarah nodded in agreement. The social media engagement is still growing, but internet attention spans are short. If we're going to expand, now is the time to do it. Or what would expansion actually look like? Martha asked. David pulled out a notebook where he had been sketching ideas. Phase 1, hire 2 experienced leather workers to help with production. Phase 2, establish an apprenticeship program for young people who want to learn the craft. Phase 3, create a line of standard products for wholesale while maintaining the custom work that's our signature. And all of this while maintaining the quality that got us here in the first place. That's exactly why your oversight is crucial, David said. Every piece that goes out the door has to meet Richardson's standards. No compromises on quality, no shortcuts in craftsmanship. Over the next several hours, they worked through the practical details of expansion. The building had enough space in the back to accommodate additional workstations. The wholesale orders from Linda's boutique and similar inquiries they had received could provide steady cash flow. The apprenticeship program could help preserve traditional techniques while providing affordable labor for standard production. By late afternoon, they had outlined a plan that felt both ambitious and manageable. Martha would remain the master craftsperson and final authority on all quality decisions. David would handle business operations, expansion planning, and financial management. Sarah would continue managing social media and customer communications, while also helping to train new employees in the Richardson approach to customer service. Edgar Patterson arrived just before closing time to pick up his restored boots. Unaware of the dramatic changes that had taken place since he dropped them off. "How much do I owe you?" Edgar asked, examining his boots with obvious pleasure. Martha looked at the boots. Boots that had represented a financial loss when she agreed to repair them. Boots that had been featured in the social media post that caught George Strait's attention. Boots that had inadvertently helped save her business. $20, Martha said, the same price she had quoted before her world changed. "Same as always." Edgar smiled and counted out $20 in worn bills. "You know, Martha, I heard about your famous visitor last week. Folks are saying George Strait bought every boot in the shop." "Word travels fast in Cedar Creek," Martha replied. "It does indeed, and I want you to know how proud this whole town is of what you've accomplished. Your grandfather would be pleased to see his shop getting recognition for the quality work it's always done." After Edgar left, Martha sat in her grandfather's chair behind the counter and looked around the shop that had been her whole world for so long. Tomorrow, everything would be different. There would be new employees to train, new systems to implement, new challenges to navigate. But tonight, for just a few more hours, it was still the same small-town leather shop, where 3 generations of Richardsons had practiced their craft, served their community, and preserved traditions that might otherwise have been lost. Martha picked up the framed photograph of her grandfather that sat on the corner of her desk. In the picture, he was standing in front of the shop in 1962, wearing his leather apron and holding a pair of boots he had just finished. "I hope I'm doing right by you, Grandpa," she whispered to the photograph. "I hope expanding the business doesn't mean losing what made it special in the first place." Outside, the sun was setting over Main Street, painting the old buildings in golden light that made them look timeless and permanent. Cedar Creek was still a small town with its share of economic challenges, but Richardson's Leather and Boots was no longer just fighting for survival. Thanks to the unexpected kindness of a country music legend and the power of authentic storytelling, Martha Richardson was now fighting for something much more ambitious: the chance to preserve traditional craftsmanship for future generations while building a business that could thrive in the modern world. It was a delicate balance, but for the first time in months, Martha felt confident that it was a balance she could maintain. 6 months later, Richardson's Leather and Boots had been transformed while somehow remaining exactly what it had always been. The shop itself looked much the same. The same worn oak counter, the same hand-tooled saddles hanging from wooden pegs, the same rich aroma of leather and wax that had welcomed customers for over 60 years. But behind the familiar facade, everything had changed. The expansion had happened gradually, thoughtfully, under Martha's careful supervision. 2 experienced leatherworkers, Maria Santos and Jake Williams, had joined the team in May. Both brought decades of experience and shared Martha's commitment to quality craftsmanship. The apprenticeship program had launched in June with 3 eager young people, including Jessica Murphy, who had decided to spend her gap year before college learning traditional leatherworking techniques. The back workshop had been expanded into the adjacent building, which David had negotiated to purchase from the retiring barbershop owner next door. The new space housed the production area for wholesale orders while preserving the original workshop for custom pieces and training. Martha stood in the doorway between the old and new sections, watching Jake demonstrate proper stitching techniques to the apprentices. The scene reminded her of her own childhood, learning at her father's side, absorbing lessons that went far beyond the technical aspects of leatherwork. "Penny for your thoughts?" Sarah asked, joining Martha in the doorway. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Martha replied. 6 months ago, I was ready to give up. Today, we have more orders than we can fill, 3 apprentices eager to learn, and a waiting list for custom work that extends into next year. The business had indeed thrived beyond everyone's expectations. The viral story of George Strait's visit had generated sustained interest in authentic craftsmanship. Orders came in daily from across the country, and the wholesale relationship with Linda Murphy's boutique had expanded to include 12 similar stores in major Texas cities. More importantly, the apprenticeship program was attracting young people from across the state who wanted to learn traditional skills. Jessica had proven to be a natural talent, with an intuitive understanding of leather that reminded Martha of herself at that age. "Have you seen today's mail?" Sarah asked, handing Martha a thick envelope with an official-looking return address. Martha opened the envelope and found a letter from the Texas Historical Commission, along with an application packet for designation as a Texas Treasure Business, a recognition program for family enterprises that had preserved important cultural traditions for multiple generations. "They want to feature us in their annual publication," Martha said, reading the letter. "And there's a ceremony in Austin where they present the awards. Are you going to apply?" Martha considered the question. The old Martha might have been uncomfortable with such official recognition, preferring to work quietly in the background. But the events of the past 6 months had taught her that sometimes accepting recognition was important, not for ego, but for the preservation of traditions that deserved to be celebrated and continued. "Yes," she said finally. "Grandpa Joe and Dad would be proud to have their work recognized this way." The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, a mix of locals and visitors who had made the drive to Cedar Creek, specifically to see the shop that George Strait had made famous. Martha had worried that the attention might change the community feeling of the business, but the opposite had proven true. The increased foot traffic had benefited other Main Street businesses, and longtime customers, like Edgar Patterson, continued to receive the same personal attention they had always enjoyed. Around 3 o'clock, Tom Bradley stopped by with news that brought Martha's transformation full circle. "I wanted to let you know," Tom said, "that the bank's board of directors voted last week to use Richardson's leather and boots as a case study for successful small business revitalization. They want to offer similar support packages to other struggling Main Street businesses." "What kind of support packages?" "Flexible refinancing options combined with marketing assistance. Basically, what we worked out with you, but structured as an official program. Your success has convinced the board that investing in authentic local businesses can be profitable for everyone involved." Martha felt a deep satisfaction knowing that their struggle and success might help other family businesses survive and thrive. It was another way that preserving Richardson's legacy was contributing to the broader community. The day's most significant moment came just before closing time, when a familiar black pickup truck pulled up in front of the shop. George Strait stepped out, wearing a pair of the boots Martha had custom-made for him after his initial visit. "Mr. Strait!" Sarah exclaimed. "What a wonderful surprise!" "I was passing through the area again," George said with a smile, "and I wanted to see how things were going. This place looks busy." "Thanks to you," Martha said, coming out from behind the counter to greet him. "No, ma'am," George replied. "Thanks to your willingness to fight for something worth preserving, I just helped level the playing field a little." He looked around the expanded shop with obvious approval. "I see you've been busy. Are those young people I saw in the back workshop your apprentices?" "3 of them," Martha said proudly, "learning techniques that have been passed down through 3 generations of Richardsons. And how many more generations do you think they'll be passed down to?" Martha considered the question. Jessica Murphy had already expressed interest in staying on after her gap year to become a full-time craftsperson. The other apprentices showed similar dedication. The financial pressure that had once threatened to end the Richardson legacy had been replaced by sustainable growth and community support. "At least 3 more," Martha said confidently. "Maybe more." George nodded approvingly. "That's what I was hoping to hear." He paused, looking thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking about that conversation we had about preserving traditions and supporting authentic craftsmanship. I'd like to do something more." "What did you have in mind?" "I want to establish a scholarship fund, the Richardson Family Craftsmanship Scholarship. It would help young people from rural communities attend your apprenticeship program, learn traditional skills, and then either stay here to work or go back to their own communities to start similar businesses." Martha felt tears welling in her eyes. "Mr. Strait, that's incredibly generous, but it's not just generous," George interrupted gently. "It's necessary. What you've built here is a model for preserving important traditions while adapting to modern realities. That model needs to be replicated in communities across Texas and beyond." Over the next hour, they discussed the details of the scholarship program. George proposed funding 4 full scholarships annually, covering both training costs and living expenses for apprentices from disadvantaged backgrounds. The program would be administered through Richardson's Leather and Boots, but would ultimately help establish similar operations in other small towns. "The goal," George explained, "is to create a network of authentic craftspeople who can support each other, share techniques, and ensure that these traditions don't disappear when individual shops close." As George prepared to leave, he shook hands with Martha, Sarah, David, and each of the apprentices who had gathered to meet their benefactor. "Remember," he told the young people, "you're not just learning to work with leather, you're becoming guardians of traditions that connect us to our history and our values. That's a responsibility worth taking seriously." After George left, the team gathered in the original workshop to discuss the scholarship program and its implications for the business. The conversation naturally turned to the broader question of what they had accomplished and where they were headed. "You know what strikes me most about all of this?" David said. 6 months ago, we were focused entirely on survival. Today, we're talking about expanding our impact beyond our own business. That's a completely different kind of success." Martha looked around the room, at Sarah, whose social media expertise had connected their story to the world, at David, whose business acumen had made sustainable growth possible, at the apprentices, whose enthusiasm reminded her why the work mattered, at the tools and materials that represented generations of accumulated knowledge. "I think that's what Grandpa Joe and Dad would be most proud of," Martha said. "Not just that we saved the business, but that we found a way to share what they taught us with people who will carry it forward." As the sun set over Main Street, casting the same golden light that had illuminated Cedar Creek for generations, Martha Richardson felt a deep sense of completion. The crisis that had nearly ended her family's legacy had instead become the catalyst for ensuring that legacy would continue far beyond anything previous generations had imagined. Richardson's Leather and Boots was no longer just a small-town shop struggling to survive. It had become a symbol of what was possible when authentic craftsmanship met modern marketing, when community support combined with individual determination, and when unexpected kindness created opportunities for growth and service. The note that George Strait had left 6 months earlier still sat framed on Martha's desk, reminding her daily that her work touched lives in ways she might never fully understand. But now she had tangible proof of that impact, in the apprentices learning traditional skills, in the wholesale customers preserving craftsmanship in urban markets, in the scholarship program that would extend their influence to communities across the region. Martha locked the shop that evening, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. The balance between honoring tradition and embracing change would always require careful attention. The responsibility of training the next generation of craftspeople would demand patience and wisdom. But she also knew that the foundation was solid. The Richardson legacy of quality craftsmanship, community service, and authentic values had not only survived, but had found new ways to flourish in the modern world. As she walked home through the quiet streets of Cedar Creek, Martha Richardson carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, when you refuse to give up on something truly worth preserving, the universe conspires to help you not just save it, but share it with the world. The story that had begun with a simple act of kindness, a country music legend buying every pair of boots in a small-town store, had evolved into something much larger, a demonstration of how authentic craftsmanship, community support, and unexpected generosity could combine to create lasting positive change. Richardson's leather and boots would continue to serve Cedar Creek and customers around the world, but more importantly, it would continue to serve as proof that some things are too valuable to be allowed to disappear, and that sometimes preserving those things requires the courage to share them with a much larger community. The note that had changed everything remained on Martha's desk, but its message had expanded far beyond a single struggling business. It had become a reminder that craftsmanship, community, and kindness could indeed change the world, one hand-stitched boot at a time. The end. Word count: approximately 91,500 characters, was perhaps in his 60s, with weathered hands and laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of a life lived outdoors. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't immediately place where she might have seen him before. "We're open," Martha replied, "though as you can see, we're dealing with some flood issues. Can I help you with something?" The man looked around the shop with obvious appreciation, taking in the hand-tooled saddles, the displays of custom boots, and the workshop area visible through the open door in the back. "I've been hearing good things about this place," he said, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl. "Saw some posts online about the craftsmanship here. Thought I'd stop by and see for myself." Sarah looked up from her phone, where she had been documenting the flood damage for insurance purposes. She studied the man's face with growing recognition, but said nothing. "What kind of work are you looking for?" Martha asked. "Well, I'll tell you what," the man said, walking slowly around the shop and examining various pieces of work. "I'm always in need of good boots. Spend most of my time on stage these days, and I go through boots like most people go through socks." "On stage?" Martha asked. The man smiled. "I'm a musician, country music mostly, travel around quite a bit for work." He stopped in front of a display of handmade boots, picking up a size 10 in rich brown leather. "Now this is fine work. What would something like this cost?" "Those are $450, Martha replied. "Hand-stitched, custom-fitted. The leather is top-grain cowhide from a tannery in Oklahoma that's been in business for over 100 years. And worth every penny, I'd say." The man continued examining boots, asking detailed questions about construction methods, leather quality, and Martha's experience as a craftsperson. His knowledge of leatherwork was impressive, and Martha found herself relaxing into the kind of technical discussion she rarely had with casual customers. "You know quite a bit about boot making," Martha observed. Had to learn, the man replied. When you're performing 3-4 nights a week, your boots better be comfortable and well made, or you'll pay for it in sore feet and aching legs. As they talked, Martha found herself drawn into conversation about the history of the shop, her family's 3 generations of craftsmanship, and her hopes for preserving traditional leather working techniques. The man listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about her grandfather's methods and the challenges of running a small business in a changing economy. "Sounds like you've been facing some tough times," he said, after Martha mentioned the recent storm damage and financial pressures. "Every small business has its challenges," Martha replied diplomatically. "That's true enough, but some challenges are bigger than others." The man was quiet for a moment, studying a saddle that had taken Martha's father 3 weeks to complete. "Tell you what, I like what I see here. The quality, the attention to detail, the history behind it all. I'd like to place an order." "What did you have in mind?" "All of them?" Martha blinked, not sure she had heard correctly. "I'm sorry. All the boots you have in stock, every pair. I'd like to buy them all." Martha and Sarah exchanged glances. The shop currently had 37 pairs of boots in various sizes, ranging in price from $300 to $650. It represented months of work and nearly $18,000 in inventory. "Sir, I'm not sure you understand. That's quite a lot of boots. Most people don't need more than 1 or 2 pairs."